But what has happened now is the shooter's mother wrote an open letter to the victims' families, sort of, I guess, attempting to reach out to them in light of what has happened here. That letter, I want you to take a listen to it. One of our producers is going to read it. But this was the response of the shooter's mother. We know what's going on here with that whole family as we're trying to understand how this 14-year-old ended up where he did. But here's what his mom had to say to the families.
To the parents and families of those affected by the tragic events at Apalachee High School, I want to say that I am so sorry from the bottom of my heart. If I could take the place of Mason and Christian, I would without a second thought. As a parent, I've always said that the loss of one of my children would be the only thing that I wouldn't be able to come back from. I feel all of your pain and devastation. I grieve and cry with you. My heart breaks for the two teachers who gave their lives while in the service of teaching and protecting our children. We are all in a living nightmare right now, and I will personally never forgive myself for what has happened. My son Colt is not a monster. He is my oldest baby. He is quiet, thoughtful, caring, funny, and extremely intelligent. Please pray for him and the rest of our family, as I am praying for all of you every moment of every day. Love is the only thing that will get us through this tragedy.
Now, it's not clear how that's being received by the family, but it is what it is. This is what's happening in the case. Now, I want to remind you about the shooter's family and where everyone stands tonight in this case. You've got the 14-year-old, the accused shooter. He's been charged. He was living with his father at the time. His father allegedly purchased the weapon. He was visited by law enforcement before he purchased that weapon about an alleged threat. He's been charged with murder. And there's mom on the right. She was not necessarily the custodial parent, the physical custodial parent at the time. She has not been charged, but there were communications back and forth with the school that morning, apparently, in all of this. Now, this is not the first time we've seen a family member charged. The first time was in the other trials that we covered here on Court TV out of Oxford, Michigan, the Crumbly cases. And in that case, the shooter convicted, the father charged and convicted, the mother charged and convicted. So I want to get some perspective on this, and I want all perspectives on this issue, because this is a new place where we are, where the parents of school shooters are being criminally prosecuted for the deaths of the victims. So let me bring in our special guest, nationally known criminal defense attorney, specializing in difficult and prejudicial accusations. She represented the Oxford school shooter's mother, Jennifer Crumbly. Shannon Smith is with us. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know this is an issue you're passionate about, and we saw your passion inside the courtroom during the course of the trial that we covered here on Court TV. I wanted to begin by getting your reaction to what's happening now in Georgia with the shooter, the accused shooter's father being charged with murder in this case.
Well, first of all, obviously there could be nothing worse than what's happened in Georgia in terms of another school shooting and leaving 4 dead and so many others injured. The problem is charging the parent is not going to make a difference. And if it did make a difference, we wouldn't be here right now if any lesson was taken from what happened up in Michigan. And so while this is a horrible situation and everyone wants to find answers, all that's really happened is prosecutors have put a Band-Aid out again, just like I said in the Crumbly case, to make everyone feel better, make everyone feel like something's going to happen when it has no true effect to heal and to truly fix what needs to be fixed.
So what are your thoughts about the role of a parent in a case like this, right? This is a case where police visited the father and the son about a year and 3 or 4 months prior to the shooting. gave them notice that they believed that he was responsible for a threat that was done, not only a threat to a mass shooting, but also to take his own life. So they had that visit. A few months later, he allegedly purchases that same son his own rifle. Now, I understand they're hunters. We get that. But purchased that gun for the child, who then subsequently brings it to school, according to prosecutors, and uses it. What is the role and the responsibility of the parent in those circumstances?
So the biggest problem with looking at what the parents did or did not do is it is an absolute lose-lose situation. If the parents knew there was something wrong or something they had to keep track of with their child and failed to do it, they're in trouble in one way. If the parents didn't realize it and it was not on their radar, they're in trouble in a completely different way. The truth is that the parents are just screwed. No matter what you do, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. There's another case up here in Michigan where a mom was texting her son, warning him to slow down on the highway, and that's being used against her now and possibly prosecuting her for an accident he caused. So as parents, we have to sit back and wonder, what can we do? If we do something, are we creating liability for ourselves? If we don't do something, are we creating liability for ourselves? And the truth is, there is no answer, and it's because the right answer is not going after the parents. That's not solving the problem.
Your perspective is very unique in all this. You were in the middle of it in Michigan. So what, and I know you've thought a lot about this, what is a solution? What is the path that society should be going down right now?
You know, I have 4 kids and I wish I had the answer. It's something that's kept me up many nights of my youngest not sleeping and sleeping in my bed with my husband and I. I've thought about it over and over. I don't know what the right answer is. But I will say this, when I saw the amount of money that was put into the investigation and the efforts to convict the Crumbleys, for example, a lot of that money could have been much better used putting protection in place to make those schools like Fort Knox to walk in the door. And those shootings could have been completely prevented if a gun had not gone through that door. And so changing gun laws, there's a lot of work to be done. Changing all kinds of rules, lots to be done. Being more aware of mental health, lots more we can do. But at the very least, in my opinion, we at least have to get these schools secured so when our kids are going to school, they can worry about math homework and not being shot.
Shannon, what's the message to the victims' parents and the rest of their family and the friends who understand, based upon these allegations, that there was notice, like this child was on the radar? Law enforcement actually visited the home, yet the father still decided in his discretion to purchase to get a gun for his 14-year-old son just after this visit from law enforcement. Is there, what do you tell the parents? What do you say? Well, there's nothing we can do? The parents aren't responsible?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a very popular response, but what I think is important is that the parents understand that it may feel better to charge the parents and feel like they're getting their pound of flesh by doing so, but it's not going to fix the larger problem. And what would be more helpful is really doing the investigations into why these things happen. And that's something that in Michigan, the prosecutors made it so that an investigation could never take place. And an investigation into this is what would really teach us what is causing this, what is the root of the problem we need to fix. So if anything, I would obviously pray for these parents and pray for these families, but I would also encourage them to keep their eye on what's going to move society forward and keep these tragedies from happening. And what's going to move things forward is a good investigation, figuring out the root of the problem, They are never going to get their loved ones back. There's no doubt about it. But it's time to stop putting Band-Aids on things.
Okay, final question, and this is, I've asked you questions, but if there's anything else on this issue that you think people should know, what is it?
You know, lately my friends have been asking me for advice, and as a mom of 4, I mean, this advice might sound silly, but you almost don't have children. Don't have children. You want to be safe? Don't have children. Because we've turned this into a slippery slope that's going in so many different directions in all kinds of cases. And that, I mean, I'm laughing as I say it, but I'm really not. Don't have children.
Shannon Smith, appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that your opinion, people will react a certain way to your opinion, but I want to hear all sides of all issues that we discuss here on this program, so I thank you for your time and your input. All right, folks, when we come back, you saw them already. We gave you a sneak preview. The think tank is here, their reaction to all of this, plus coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates the OnlyFans murder, Courtney Clenny, an internet star known for wearing very few pieces of clothing, is accused of stabbing her boyfriend and killing him. Was this self-defense? We investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan
In every story, in every trial, every case, there's at least 2 sides to it.
to dive into the latest
Oh my God.
and breaking true crime stories.
This was a very targeted, very personal attack.
Inside
I've never seen that in Discovery. I've been incarcerated 3 years.
and outside of the courtroom.
She's a psychopath.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
If the parents knew there was something wrong or something they had to keep track of with their child and failed to do it, they're in trouble in one way. If the parents didn't realize it and it was not on their radar, they're in trouble in a completely different way. The truth is that the parents are just screwed. No matter what you do, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. There's another case up here in Michigan where a mom was texting her son, warning him to slow down on the highway, and that's being used against her now and possibly prosecuting her for an accident he caused. So as parents, we have to sit back and wonder, what can we do? If we do something, are we creating liability for ourselves? If we don't do something, are we creating liability for ourselves? And the truth is, there is no answer, and it's because the right answer is not going after the parents. That's not solving the problem.
That's Shannon Smith. She's the attorney for Jennifer Crumbly, one of the parents in the Oxford school shooting who was convicted for the deaths of the children murdered by her son. There she is commenting on everything tonight. I want to get some reaction to all of that and this important issue of charging parents criminally. In the Georgia case, it's murder. The father's been charged with murder for the killings that were done by his 14-year-old son, allegedly. Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight live in studio, criminal defense attorney, entertainment attorney, and former assistant DA in Atlanta, Daryl Cohen. Also with us, criminal defense attorney and Emory University law professor, Molly Palmer. And finally, the best criminal defense investigator, Charles Middlestat. Great to see everyone tonight. Molly, she said don't have kids.
She did. Okay, I knew you were gonna start with me because I am, I guess, notoriously child-free by choice, but let me say something. I was a school teacher for 5 years before I became an attorney, and one of my former colleagues is a school teacher at Apalachee High School, and he doesn't have kids. So I'm not here to vilify those that maybe have made choices and are seen as not contributing to the lives of the youth, when in fact maybe we have in other meaningful ways. But I think what was meaningful about what the great attorney Shannon Smith said is that it's kind of like we don't know where to draw the line, where this can conceivably end, right? And under Georgia law, it's a really interesting prosecution. So you have the similar charge of involuntary manslaughter, which is what Jennifer and James Crumbley have been convicted of. But in addition, we see this kind of novel use of a second-degree cruelty to children charge, typically a misdemeanor, and that's how you get to murder. Our homicide statute under Georgia law says that if you commit this misdemeanor of cruelty to children and it results in death, then you're guilty of murder. I actually think it's an easier path for prosecutors to take. And the question is whether you're negligent. Your negligence led to the cruelty against the child. And how much negligence is enough to get us there when we're talking about life in prison, when we're talking about murder? Is it letting your child who has mental health issues play violent video games? You know, buying the gun alone is not a crime in Georgia. There's no prohibition against buying a child a rifle or a shotgun in this state. So where do we draw the line? And I think that that's what she was posing to the audience, is that it's this very slippery slope. You're going to be liable for whatever you do, or you're liable for whatever you don't. And it leaves us in a very unknown and frightening place.
I so disagree with Shannon. One, she talks about a Band-Aid. Well, I'd rather have a Band-Aid than no aid. And we talk about the slippery slope, but we also talk about do the right thing. Oh my gosh. So the parent, dad, was interviewed a year and 3 months ago before it happened. That to me is more than just negligence. That is absolutely being part of it. And then buying his son a gun, I'm not against guns. I'm certainly not for guns with young kids, especially teenagers who have mental problems. And look what happened. And I agree with her. We need to have better security at the schools. I've often said that if we had a perimeter and you make people go through a metal detector, it will stop the in-school shootings, but it won't stop the out-school shootings. And no, there's not an answer. There are numerous answers. We have to go after numerous places, go to numerous ways in order to make it better. We don't want to see another child killed, and he or she will be.
This is obviously a very, very complicated question. As a parent, I look at this, I wrestle with these same issues. The approach is multi-layered. Clearly, we got to deal with mental health. We have to deal with gun laws. If you, just like Daryl said, if once you harden, let's assume that we harden every single target, every single school in this country, you're going to start seeing shootings outside of the schools. Because if people are motivated, if they have mental health issues, if there's something that drives them to choose to think this is some sort of rational behavior or it's justifiable in some way, it's going to happen. So the solutions lie in other areas. But the fact of the matter is, and Molly pointed out, Georgia, we have a very different statute than the rest of the country that allows for different sorts of prosecutions. But the reality is that negligence is negligence, and there's no one single standard, right? There's context around this. I recall being part of a prosecution involving racing by teenagers, high school kids in Gwinnett County, and the father got charged because one of the participants, one of the defendants, the tires were bald. And so he was found negligent for allowing her to drive a vehicle that was essentially unsafe on the road, okay? The texting thing, look, if you have, if you are on notice and you have been watching your child speeding for weeks on end and you've warned them over and over and over, and yet you haven't taken the keys away, at some point, that's a level of negligence that is not acceptable. It's an imminent danger. A car is a deadly weapon in the hands of a kid who's reckless and who doesn't respect the privilege of driving and doesn't respect the rules of the road and the laws. And so at some point, as a parent, you are in charge of your minors, right? You're the decision maker. You're the authority figure, and at some point, you have responsibility. Where that happens and at what level, when it becomes negligent, that's the sort of what we're all wrestling with. Where is that responsibility?
Well, it seems prosecutors obviously getting a little more aggressive with it, and now the juries will have to wrestle with it. But my take is once a jury gets it, they're not sending that parent home scot-free. They're just not, especially in a school shooting. It's not going to happen. You have a defendant at the defendant's table in a courtroom in a school shooting case, they're done. They're done. So to me, it gives a lot of power to the prosecutor in those types of cases. And it seems like there's a public sentiment to get more and more aggressive with it because of the frustration to the school shootings. But it doesn't have the other effect, which when the Oxford case happened, I was praying that it was the wake-up call for parents coast to coast. But it wasn't for this parent. He didn't get the message.
Every parent will never get the message, but what we want to do is get as many parents out there to receive the message and take that message and do the right thing. Pay attention to their kids. Pay attention to that child, especially the child.
How about the schools, though? How about the schools? This is someone who's on the radar. FBI tracks down the IP address, gives it to local law enforcement. They say they gave the information to the school. What responsibility does the school have at that point to have protocols in place to identify an at-risk student? And then what happens when that student, like this student, ends up in another school down the road?
Right, exactly. And I think that even with, the Crumley prosecutions, it was interesting because we had some school officials and some administrators that seemed to have some quantum of knowledge about potential danger on campus, right? And if you look at the Georgia statute, it does contemplate, obviously, an individual being negligent against a child who's not necessarily their child, right? So that's how the father of the Georgia shooter is charged, right? He's charged with causing pain under this cruelty to children statute, not, because of his negligence that caused another child pain, another child that's not his own child, right? And so conceivably, we can use the same statute to charge anyone at the school if we can make that negligence connection. And I think that for the most part, people misunderstand criminal defense lawyers, and they think that we are,
You're just trying to get guilty people off.
No, that's
your job,
exactly
right?
what I'm saying.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm saying, right? It's like, we don't advocate for bad things to happen. We want solutions, but the reality is we don't think a prosecution is the best path toward a solution. And I think the fact that this happened after the prosecution of James and Jennifer is exactly why.
Just to add to Molly, we don't always think that a prosecution is the right way. In this instance, in my view, it's absolutely appropriate. And if we can get enough parents to pay attention to what happened, just maybe we'll stop one shooting, just one. And I don't want to know about it. The best news is the news that we don't know about, that never happens.
And Charles, what are your thoughts about identifying a child and then following that child wherever they go? Like I hate putting like a mark on a child's record, but this is an at-risk child.
Listen, at some point there has to be...
One other thing, because you're a great investigator. The IP address stuff, like people get prosecuted like for child pornography through an IP address.
Right.
And in this case, the IP address didn't seem to be enough for them to do anything to this child.
Yeah, listen, I think there's so much that can be done, and I think sometimes one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and so that's where the cracks are, and that's when things fall through the cracks, and unfortunately really bad things happen. There's actionable information or intelligence that we're just not acting on, that we're not reacting to in time, and then after the fact, almost every single one of these cases, every single one of these incidents, when we go back and do the look back, and retroactively, we see, there was these posts, there was these signs, there was this, we knew about this, there was a parent-teacher conference, the law enforcement showed up at this kid's house, right? I mean, if you look, you can't help but to be sympathetic when you watch the body camera footage. You see a dad who's really struggling to try to connect with his kid. He wants to do the right thing. He's even telling law enforcement, hey, emphasize that to him, right? Make sure he understands that this is serious. And I'm going to be really mad if this happened. But then the actions are different after, right? But you can see this is a guy who's actually really trying to do the right thing. He's in a bad circumstance. He's been evicted. He's now with his son. He's trying to connect with him. He's trying to make things normal for his son. He's trying to engage in activities where there's some bonding.
But that bonding activity is hunting.
That's hunting, which is
normal, except if you've threaten to shoot up a school
context,
and take your own life.
That's what I was referring to, the context. And so when we talk about negligence, we have to consider it. It's not a one standard. It's not a one size fits all. It's not like this is a crime, that's not a crime. Each circumstance you're going to have to evaluate, and that's where prosecutors are going to have to make judgment calls, and we're going to have to, hopefully they make good ones, and they're not just trying to appease the public's concern and zest and hunger for solutions to these problems.
Yeah, I think that's
an
where we are.
overreaction.
I think that's where we are right now. So we're going to obviously keep an eye and keep this conversation going and keep an eye on that story.